Today's episode is about mapping a city. Let's take a look at this port city and see what kind of city buildings we can put in there. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this piece of paper here, I'm going to tear it out, and I'm going to set it aside. Now referencing my island, I'm going to start drawing that in a larger scale. Take that edge of the curve, the beak of the eagle or phoenix or hawk that we referenced before. I'm going to curve that out, bring it in like we had before. A little bit larger maybe. There we go. Bring it up more like that. Come down so that the harbor ends up being very large in scale. We can see it better. We can even give it a little bit different coastline feel because now we can see even more of the detail of the coastline. Bring it back up. So, and off to the edge. And that can come up like so, and that can go off the edge. Alright, so now our port city is going to be in this curve, in this dip. It's going to now represent, it's going to come up, just cover it in more squares, that way showing that the scale is more detailed. Build an outer edge wall. Now that can work. Actually, let's take this more to the side. Now that I'm re-referencing my island that I drew, looks like it's going to be more over this way. As I said before, it doesn't have to be perfect, but the closer you get it to all of your other material, the more your characters or players will be able to reference all of your material and understand with greater detail what your world is like. Detail is important in the D&D world. You want to make them feel that they are not just hearing about your city, but seeing your city. Okay, comes up here. Even moving through your city. Hopefully not burning down your city. Alright. Come in here. Go up a little bit more. 3 or 4 squares. Gives a little bit more detail. In. And so now we have an outer edge. And this is just a sketch of the outer areas of the city. You can erase this when you're done, put in walls, put in towers, put in cannon sites, and so on and so forth. Now, looking at the shape of your city, you figure you're going to have a few docks for boats, so we can draw those in. You want to determine also the approximate population of your city. This being a small island, going back to our island, let me bring that back over here. Small island in the middle of the ocean. You may figure that this dock city has about 1,000 people, 2,000 people. Alright, so with a population of about 2,000 people, you figure you might have a couple of inns, several houses, some industry buildings, and a city center. Let's start with the docks, of course. So, let's make dock here. And we can even go so far as to go out like so. place for the boat to come in and rest, tie off at. I'll make a little note about scale in a minute. I'll talk to you about scale and what each square would be in terms of square yards, square meters, square feet, etc. Let's see. That's going to have like 2 squares wide. And that will come out like so. May even erase that, make that one 2 squares wide as well. Okay. So you've got a place for 2 to 3 boats to put in. That one would be a little bit trickier, maybe for smaller boats or very skilled pilots, captains. You have a spot here for a boat, obviously a spot here for maybe a larger boat. And let's take this corner and build it into a tower. Towers are great for possibly serving as a lighthouse to designate that it's going to be like some sort of a tower. You want to give it thicker walls. I'll take the map around this way. Like so. Once again, I am not an expert artist, and it's important that you have an idea of what each representation is in case you're not an expert artist. And so we will possibly draw a smaller square on top of that, as it will be a tower-like structure rising up out of the ground. And like I said, because I'm not an expert artist, I'm going to put an arrow right here. And I'm going to write Lighthouse Tower. Okay. I might even put like a dot here to represent maybe a bonfire, and maybe a reflective surface back here, like some sort of a mirror. Maybe a beacony thing out here, like so. An arrow pointing out that way. We may even do a small circle out here with a cone shape representing a fog horn that, in terms of D&D characters, might be blown by a hardy dwarf or a rowdy orc in case there's fog in the bay, in the harbor. All right, so we have our lighthouse. We have our docks. Let's do. And we know that this area actually comes out over the water. So it's probably supported by large beams, posts, perhaps stone, maybe magic. It's all up to you. So now let's talk about industry. Well, we are in the ocean, and primary industry in the ocean could be fishing. So let's go, docks come down here, let's build a warehouse. Warehouse is pretty easy. It's a big square building, or a rectangular building in this case. All right. So we've got a warehouse, and now that I'm looking at it, this doesn't look like a long enough city, so once again I can adjust. That's why it's important to draw in pencil. You can always adjust your drawing if you use pencil. Let's see, coming down here. There we go. So we'll just adjust it slightly for now, give it a few more squares long. Alright, so we have a warehouse. And in this warehouse, they process fish. Now, we don't have to draw anything to indicate that. What we can do is we can just put fish processing warehouse. A few abbreviations, and you've got that building designated. All right. Well, D&D towns, especially in the wilds, might need a temple or a healer of some kind. So let's put a temple someplace. Well, you'd have to think about what kind of a god would rule in this area. Maybe a god of the sea. If he's a god of the sea, maybe you want him out by the docks. So let's put a temple here. Over by the lighthouse. In fact, we can put it close enough to the lighthouse so that the temple serves as the governing force of the lighthouse. You know, they hire the rowdy orc or the hardy dwarf to blow the foghorn, light the fire, so on and so forth. We can even make it part of the temple. The temple can be quite large, for example. Maybe it's a place where boats can be built or repaired even. So we can do that. And now we know that this is a temple. If you have a name for the deity that governs this area, you can put it in here. I don't have a name for a deity at the moment, but we'll certainly consider one. And it's definitely within sight of the docks, so those coming in and docking their ships would know, go to the temple, make your donations, and your next voyage should be at least as safe as this one, hopefully. All right, now we need a city center. A city center should be in the center of the city. So let's do that. It doesn't have to be a very large building. This one can be a 2x2 square building. And a city center is more often, in my thoughts, in terms of D&D, either some sort of an administrative building or a barracks. We can probably go with a barracks off to the side, on either side of an administrative building. Okay. Now, since that we've got your barracks located here, and barracks located here, most likely the administrative building is going to be run by a knightly order or a fighter type of person, as opposed to a sage or a wizard type person. All right, and this can be the city center. You can give it a more fancy name later. A couple barracks. We're going to need housing. So let's scatter some houses around. They can be one square. And they can be scattered all around. Maybe one here. One up here by the fish processing plant. We did mention an inn, so we'll have to keep some space around for that. Possibly even two. We may even extend the borders of the city a bit. Give it a larger feel. Let's see, how about a larger house? Maybe back in this area here. This can be about the same size as a city center. And how about the inn? Being within range of the sight range of the docks, range of the temple. So we'll build an inn right here. That'll be about the same size as the city center. Probably have an upstairs, maybe even a second upstairs. Need a general store. We can probably do that right here. Make a small general store. And we'll label that with a G. And I think that's pretty much it. This is a large house, possibly a mayor's house. A large house. House. Oops. Not going to write it all out. That would be silly. It's not going to fit. Label houses with an H. Alright, and we have an inn. Now the inn, we should come up with a name. Because inns should be distinct throughout your world. You don't want every inn called the City Inn. So let's call this Wave Crest. Wave Crest Inn and Suites. All right, so there you have like a small city. It's a port city. You got a fish processing plant here. You got Wave Crest Inn, where visitors can stay. You've got the city center and the barracks, where all the guards of the city will dispense from to arrest criminals, defend the city, go about their daily routes. You have a few houses and a large house. It's a very simple city. Where the rest of the 1,000 people live? Probably in shacks outside the city. Maybe in the temple. Possibly underground in the fish processing warehouse. We can get to that in a few minutes. Alright, so now we need a name for the town. Well, it's a harbor town. Why don't we call this one Safe Harbor? So we can designate this Safe Harbor. Names for towns are fairly important, I would say. If you call it Desolation Cliff, then most likely people who pilot and captain boats will not dock their ship there. If you call it Safe Harbor, they're more likely to stop in and see if there's a place to put their boat up for a few days. All right, so we have Safe Harbor. This episode has been brought to you in hopes that we will eventually get sponsored by Mountain Dew.